My name is Kenneth Valentine, a veteran of the United States Secret Service, including protecting 3 sitting presidents, and this is everything that I'm authorized to tell you. Truth is that the Secret Service is anything but secret. Everything we do is on the front page of the news every single day. And so when you have a success, we shrink into the darkness. People don't even think about you. If you have a failure, it's front page news. The Butler, Pennsylvania shooting has been difficult on many fronts. We failed. The Secret Service failed. You know, the first and foremost is that one person died inside a secured event. 3 other people, including former president, were wounded inside that event. There's just no way you can't use the word failure when shots are fired into what is supposed to be a secured venue. I was actually clued in by a text from multiple agents because I was in the hospital with my mother who was about to have open heart surgery, and I had to commandeer the TV in the room from her bedside roommate and put it on a news show to pick up what was happening. I have to assume that we didn't follow our own protocol, that we did not pay attention to detail, which is one of the mantras of the Presidential Protection Detail is to pay attention to detail. And that's one of the failures that I see with Butler is not only was he able to get off rounds, but he was able to focus in, to see the protectee from outside the venue and to put those shots in with some accuracy. So that's actually multiple failures. You don't want to be reacting to the sound of gunshot because those bullets have already whizzed past if you hear it. When prevention doesn't work and now you're reacting, your job is to cover the protectee and then to evacuate that protectee. And the cover looked outstanding. The reaction by the detail was very good. They were very fast. It was fearless, as it should be. Their training kicked in, and they did exactly what we trained to do, which is get on top of that protectee and put them down. Put them down behind some assets and resources where they can't take another intentional, focused shot at the protectee. There are a myriad of ways that could have been and should have been prevented that weren't that day. Shipping containers blocking line of sight. You can't use a shipping container, which is going to stop the bullets. Could you use a flag? Could you use a banner? Could you turn that stage to where the back of the stage is now facing that threat zone that maybe you don't have all the resources to post, but you could cant the stage such that it takes away that line of sight. And now your line of sight is an empty field. Bulletproof glass. We use that at the national lighting of the Christmas tree every year for outdoor events. And so those resources are there. I think the investigation's going to have to ask those hard questions as to why weren't those kind of resources used for this event. A lot of what you see is kind of like the tip of the iceberg. You saw the protective detail around President Trump, and they're the ones in the suits that reacted and jumped on top of him and then tried to effect that getaway from the scene. You also saw counter assault team members who came out from their position kind of out of sight at a tactical position, but now they've come out of that tactical position into actual tactics. You saw them on stage because they had the helmets and the black gear. They collaborate and train with Navy SEALs, with Delta, with FBI HRT. So it's a very specialized team. They're highly trained. The images that the media shows over and over on the rooftop was our counter sniper units. So if I'm not mistaken, that's the first round one of our United States Secret Service counter snipers have ever fired at another human being. And it was a perfect shot. The evacuation looked like it met with some difficulty, and part of the problem was the protectee himself. President Trump had for him, the presence of mind to signal to the American people that I'm okay and that we're going to win this battle. Now that's great. That gave me some relief watching from my mom's hospital room. So him sticking his head up high and exposing himself was a big problem that day. And what you're looking for is compliance. You know, ideally you would want to double them over and walk them out, and hopefully they assist you in that endeavor. If they don't, and I suspect what the training is now going to say is, don't expect their help, immobilize them and get them prone. If you have to, carry them out. The way I was trained is you put your hand on the back of their head, and with one arm around their waist, if you push their head forward, they will comply. and they will start moving forward. And the same if you pull them backwards, they really come under your control at that point if you get that working. It's amazingly easy, even if you have to, make them uncomfortable or even hurt them a little bit in the process. That is more important. "9/11, hard for me to let go of, and I was on the first of 2 coveted days off in a row, and then my pager went off, and it was my boss. I'm at home, I'm ready to go. I said, if you need me to do something, I'm your guy, let's go. And he said, you know what, pack a bag and stand by. And I said, yes, sir. And I was angry, I might have hit something. I got a 4th page, and they said, get to the White House immediately. Close to midnight, we were rotating through our posts, and we get the crackle over the radio saying, we've got an inbound aircraft. I immediately think of a jumbo passenger jet full of gas. We got an altitude, we got a direction to travel, and we got a speed, and it was on a high-speed mission directly for the White House. So we did not have minutes, we had more like seconds. But the President and the First Lady had been released to go upstairs to the residence for the night. And so once their evacuation was complete, my job was to stay and fight, and then to be the point when they made their reentry. The problem was we weren't talking about a ground attack. I was left behind with a machine gun, a pistol, a radio, and a gas mask to fight what I thought was a jumbo jet that was going to crash the house any second. It wasn't a good time to argue. The circumstances are different. You just suck it up and do it. And so I covered that evacuation, and then I looked on the ground floor of the White House. Where might I survive? What if it hits at the wrong angle and there's a chance? Where would that chance be? And it was the west wall of the original White House. It has a wide archway. And I thought, if I stand in this archway and the plane hits just right and the fireball doesn't burn me alive, maybe, just maybe, there's a chance that I survive this. And so I went and stood in that archway with all my gear, my stuff, and I had what seemed like an eternity to stand there and ponder my own demise. But I remember being at great peace, and I just thought, well, I guess this is how it ends. And I've seen what happens when these big planes hit these buildings, and I knew that the wingspan of a 747 was wider than the White House itself, so it was probably all going down, and everything was going to be burned. I thought about my wife for a second, and I said, well, Lord, here I come, I'm ready. They're going to put a plaque for me up over at headquarters, and that's just all she wrote. And it wasn't too much longer that we got the crackle back on the radio that the plane had been identified, that there was no emergency, that we could unevacuate the White House. He just wasn't on the right frequency, and he didn't have his transponder turned on, so they just had no way to identify him without visually identifying him. That Air Force pilot came a lot closer to dying that night than I did, but I sure didn't know that at the time. Part of training to be a presidential or vice presidential agent is being shot at, and you need to know what that sounds like. You need to know what it feels like even. They absolutely light you up with paintballs and with plastic paint bullets and shot from real weapons, but if you do it wrong, you can count on being shot. And if you stick your head up where it shouldn't be stuck up, you're going to taste some of that paintball in your mouth, because the instructors are just that good with those weapons. And so they know the mistakes that agents are going to make in training. They've seen it all before. Being shot at is no fun, I can tell you that. And that really drives you as a Secret Service agent to bolster up prevention, because we don't want to be shot at. We want to prevent the shots from happening in the first place. So you get hit, you pay for it. It hurts, and you've got those bruises for a few weeks to think about what you did wrong. The very first thing that special agents have to do is go through a 2-week training course in Washington, D.C. And this is really your intro course to being a part of the Secret Service family. The second step is a trip to Glencoe, Georgia, to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. You learn about defensive driving, you learn about shooting and control tactics, handcuffing, a little bit of fighting, a little bit of federal law enforcement in terms of surveillance and and arrest and a lot of classroom. And then you're sent to the Secret Service training school just outside of DC. And this is where the road gets a little rougher. We start with 24. Typically, most make it. In my class, 19 out of the 24 made it. A lot of times we would have a schedule that said that the next day is all classroom, and that's a sort of a relaxing thing to know ahead of time that hey, it's all classroom. You can come dressed in your fatigues with your polo, and we're just going to be in the classroom all day. And that never seemed to work out. We would show up and the instructor would be in his workout attire, shorts and a t-shirt, and he says, "What are y'all doing dressed in those clothes? Get your PT gear on now and let's go." As our lead instructor, we had a gentleman who was a former Marine Corps officer who then had served in the CIA. He'd been in the Secret Service for a good while. He'd been on the Presidential Protection Detail, and he pushed us hard. The training lasts about 6 months. Between those 3 stops in D.C. down to Glencoe, Georgia, and back to D.C. is about 6 months. 1 week where you're learning about constitutional law, and then at the end of the day, you're headed to the long range to shoot long guns. And we would shoot everything from pistols, and that could be a 9mm, 40mm, 38 special, up to MP5s and M4s. And then our snipers, who come from our uniform division, have sniper type rifles, which are much bigger and longer. Look, I was the freak. I showed up there with right eye dominant, but I closed my right eye. And so what they worked with me because I was looking down the barrel of a pistol with my left eye, and I had just made it work all these years, but it was a bad habit. And so they moved me to a different stance, more of an open stance, and keeping both eyes open. And that was what ended up working for me. We missed those Uzis. Those were great guns. When I came into the Secret Service, that was the standard long gun for agents. And so we were all trained on the Uzi. We had that outstanding Samsonite briefcase with the Uzi in it, and we all got trained on that. But it got replaced by the MP5 probably back in the early 2000s. One of the funner parts of training was just the familiarization courses that we would be put through. And one of those, when I was on the Presidential Protection Detail, was a familiarization with the sounds. They took us out to Fort Meade, and they fired rounds over our head from various weapons. And so we got to hear what an M4 sounds like when 5.56 rounds are going over your head, or what an AK-47 rounds sound like when they're going over your head, or what a 50 cal sniper rifle sounds like when those rounds are cracking over. And very distinct sounds. You don't forget them once you've heard them, but they also taught you how to take an AK-47 apart and put it back together. What do you want to do if you want to disable a weapon that an assailant dropped and left behind and render it safe? Part of the training that we received was called control tactics. So control tactics includes hand-to-hand type exercises and combat, if you will, to knife fights, and then how to disarm somebody with a weapon. And so all of that goes into play. We start in a mat room, and you've got a rubber knife or a rubber gun, and you're working it out. You're doing it wrong 6 times to get it right 1 time, and now we've got it. Let's do it again. And these instructors, typically all a black belt in some sort of discipline, whether it's jiu-jitsu or Kempo karate or taekwondo. And so we're really getting a hodgepodge of all of those things. A lot of Gracie jiu-jitsu moves that really do work well, because we don't want to stay and fight. We want to subdue, we want to bring someone into compliance, and then we need to shove off and move. We have an axiom that we say: maximum to the protectee, minimum to the problem. You know what? Anyone can win any fight any day. And a lot of that comes back to your training and how well you train. But if you're caught off guard, if you're not mentally prepared, if you're not physically prepared, you're probably going to lose. Everyone thinks that somehow we're a spy agency or an intelligence agency, and it's really quite the opposite. We are strictly law enforcement. We use intelligence. We try to gain intelligence, but that's usually handed to us. And so we certainly need intelligence about protective efforts, about threats against the president. Attempts on the president are rare, but certainly people who would like to make an attempt are not rare. We've seen celebrities make threats, and John Wilkes Booth was probably the most famous actor in America. Everyone knew who he was at that play that night, and he was allowed to walk backstage and have access to the presidential box because of who he was. There was one comedian who displayed the severed head of a president and was interviewed about that. We're going to talk to that person and find out, what's the intent here? If someone is squawking and talking, be it on the internet or at a bar or with friends and family about their intent to do harm to one of our protectees, we investigate that. We investigate every single one of those. How serious were you? Were you drunk? Were you off your medication? What was the cause of you making that threat? We keep records on those. We track them. We educate ourselves on them. And I don't know if there's a Secret Service agent alive who hadn't been at a party or a bar or somewhere. Even family members will say things that, depending on who the president is or what their political leanings were, that they would say something inappropriate. So yeah, I've been in the presence of people who've said some really stupid things and either steer the conversation the other way because they don't know I'm an agent, or just tell them flat out, hey, you need to stop before you say something you're going to regret. Even the patients at these mental institutions were given access to telephones at different times of the day, and we knew some of them by name and I knew several of them by voice because every time they got unfettered access to a telephone, they would call our office, and they would start down this road and they would talk into our telephone recording until it ran out of tape, and talking about, I want to kill the president, I want to do this, I want to do that, and they'd email whitehouse.gov, I'm going to kill the president. People would just do stupid things, and there is a line to be crossed. It's a little blurry, but once you've crossed it, you're going to get interviewed. Secret Service protects the sitting U.S. president, their family, the sitting U.S. vice president and their family, former presidents of the United States, and then visiting heads of state. I think right now the Secret Service is protecting upwards of 40 people. But on any given day, heads of state visit the United States. Certainly when the UN General Assembly is in session, it becomes hundreds of people. Trust in the Secret Service is critical, not only trust between the agents and the hierarchy, but also trust with your protectee. So if your protectee doesn't trust you, that's a huge problem. And that's a big reason why in the early 90s, when President Clinton went through the Monica Lewinsky scandal and all that, the Secret Service was subpoenaed to testify during that scandal, and we fought it. There's not a non-disclosure for embarrassing information, but that's where agents have to kind of earn their keep. They have to be worthy of trust and confidence, that they're not going to, go off telling these stories and, divulging things. We lost, so we did have to testify. But we want to be able to have and enjoy that kind of trust with the protectees, where they can know that they can be themselves, that they can do the job that they've been elected to do. I came into the Clinton administration during his last year, and I was the junior guy who was told to shut up and keep your head down, and you need to figure out why you're here first. And so President Clinton really didn't get out and do a whole lot during that last year. Went on a few trips with him, but wouldn't say that I got to know him all that well. Probably gotten to know him better since he is a former president. President George W. Bush, I was there for his first 4 years, and that's when I really started making strides within the detail in terms of your advance preparation. So you're building your resume the whole time, working your way up to being a lead advance agent. I ran with him. He certainly appreciated the agents who were assigned to run with him because he was a heck of a runner, and so those agents stood out to him. But it wasn't like a buddy kind of thing. We had a job to do, he had a job to do. He had some very good friends, and they were not agents. So President Obama was different, though, because I was assigned to him when he was still a senator, and I was already a senior agent. I had already done the president's detail with 2 other presidents. We would go out for 3 weeks and then come back for 3 weeks. And so I came back from being with him, and my wife mysteriously becomes pregnant right after I get home. And I'm going out on my 3-week tour with Senator Obama, and it's time for my wife's ultrasound to find out if it's a boy or girl. And we always found out with all 5 kids, we're not on Air Force One, we're on a little private jet that somebody rented for him. There's a lot more intimacy when it's like that. And so I told this agent who was single with no kids, I said, hey, we're having another girl in the back of this little bitty plane. The senator had 2 staffers on the plane with him. And Reggie Love was one of them. Reggie hears this. He just turns around and he says, hey, Barack, Ken's having another girl. Not where I wanted the conversation to go. Well, I don't really want to have these kind of personal conversations with any of the protectees because we're trying to keep it professional. And so he turns around and he says, you're having another girl, huh? And I said, yes, sir. And he said, well, how many does that make? I struggled with that for just a nanosecond because I didn't want to lie to him, but I didn't want to not tell him the whole truth. So I said, well, sir, this will be number 5, 3 boys, 2 girls. And he was so taken aback by that number. 5 kids? And he held up his hand and he said, 5? Kind of forgot where I was for a second. And I said, yes, sir, 5. And we're pretty sure this last one, your fault. And in my mind, I'm thinking back to being gone for 3 weeks and coming home and, happy to be home, all that kind of stuff. And he was like, well, I don't know what to do with that, but as long as I'm not paying for college, congratulations. So the point of all that is that I didn't have favorites necessarily, but the familiarity was different with each of those. And so Senator Obama gets elected president. I get promoted to go back to the president's detail at the same time. I'll never forget the first time he saw me when I was back. And so big reunion, big hug, and there's just that familiarity. Whereas, these other 200 people that he sees, on a daily or weekly basis, there's just no frame of reference. But for me, I think it went back to that day on the plane when he thought I was accusing him of being the father of my kids. We dress for success in a little different way, and we trying to in kind of like a chameleon, fit in with our environment so that the casual observer, maybe from a distance, doesn't know, is that a Secret Service agent or is that a high-ranking department official? The special agents typically wear suits, and the truth is the suits, they don't help you buy those suits. So Joe Banks had a, buy one, get 22 free, and so I had a bunch of Joe Banks suits for a while. The wear and tear on the suits is immense. I would wear holes where the gun leather, hit my hip. I would wear a hole in my pants, and then in my jacket, there would be a hole where the hammer was covered. So sunglasses if it's sunny or if you just don't want your eye gaze to be detectable. The bulletproof vest was a requirement. You've got your issued sidearm, and we fluctuated in caliber, maybe depending on the low bidder, I don't know, but it was either a SIG or a Glock and a 9 or a 40 back to 9. You would carry extra ammo, so at least 1 extra magazine. Most agents carried at least 2 extra. We all carry the same gun. We all carry the same ammo, so that if you are out of ammo, you can get more from a partner or teammate. If there's a gun on the floor, you can pick it up and use it because you've been trained on that weapon. You've got handcuffs. You've got an issued extendable baton and a flashlight, and that was kind of minimal equipment. Everyone assigned to the president's detail had some kind of cool flashlight. They didn't issue those things, so you had to buy your own. And so that it was another way to kind of be cool, is to have the latest and greatest flashlight that you spent more than your salary on, to have at your disposal in case the lights go out and we're in a pickle. A lot of times agents were encouraged to carry an IFAC kit, and so it's just a trauma kit that, in case you are shot or your protectee is bleeding, that you've got it, immediate access to first aid equipment, a tourniquet, something to cover that wound and start that medical treatment immediately. So we also carried pagers back in the day, which then transitioned to a phone and a radio. You always had a radio. Some guys would carry backup batteries to radios because they didn't always work that well. I hope they got that worked out by now. But there's information that you carry with you just in case that I wouldn't be comfortable revealing. But there are diagrams and information about the president, about our plans, about our means and methods. But that's about all I'm authorized to divulge there. If a Secret Service agent loses equipment, it's a big deal. Certainly a weapon or even a baton. Maybe the worst thing of all that an agent can lose is their PIN. Because if you lose your PIN, now someone can impersonate you just by virtue of wearing that PIN. Now, it won't get you access to too many places, but we protect those, we number them. If you lose one, it goes out to the entire Secret Service to say, hey, Valentine lost his blue PIN number, 44221, and now it's entered into the National Criminal Information Database as a lost item if it's recovered. When agents would wobble a little bit on not blending or fitting in, then yeah, I'd call them out for it. In one specific instance, a pair of white Oakley big frame sunglasses that just didn't fit the circumstance. I went up to this agent and I said, you really thought long and hard about it and decided to wear those sunglasses anyway? And he said, hey, come on, man, my mom said these are pretty cool. And I said, well, that should have been your first sign that they don't work. So I don't want to see them again. There's not a lot that I'm authorized to say about the car. I know a lot of people call it the Beast, but I can tell you, we did not refer to that car as the Beast. I think that was a media invention that kind of caught on. In fact, when I was on the President's detail, we took delivery of the first upgraded car that they refer to as the Beast. And every car that we used prior to that time was a real car that was pulled off the line in Detroit, was likely sawed in half, stretched, and then armored it. In the process, the car now weighs too much for the frame. The tires won't support it, the suspension won't carry it, the brakes won't stop it, and the engine won't pull it. Those were not ideal. In fact, the first time I drove the President was in an old style car. I missed the drop-off point by about 12 feet because I'm standing on the brakes and the car won't stop. And, that's just the way it was. You needed some lead-up time to get that thing rolling, and so it just wasn't ideal. Those upgraded cars that we've had since about 2000 are really not a car at all. It's an armored system that looks like a car, much more like a tank that's got a plastic car wrapped around it. And so it's got a Cadillac dash, it's got Cadillac furnishings on the inside, it's got a nice steering wheel, but the workings of that car actually work. You step on the gas and that thing goes. I mean, it's got a huge engine in it. The tires support it. I mean, it really is quite a beast in terms of its capability, but it does have a downside, and it does not fly and it does not float. We get some really funny looks when we're in transport mode without him because we don't have our own gas pumps. We take it to a local gas station and put high-octane gas in that thing, and people are driving by looking at us and taking pictures and getting a kick out of the fact that they think that might be the President's car, getting gassed up at the Chevron oil station. The only people authorized to drive that car are the Presidential Protective Detail agents who are currently assigned to the transportation section. We've built out a program called the Protective Operations Driving Course, and it's not nothing. It's a tough course. It's a 2-week class that you have to pass in order to remain in that section and to be eligible to drive with the President in the car. We always travel with a mechanic, and it's one of the coolest things I thought about the President's detail. The mechanics are not agents. They're protective support technicians. That's their title. And we recruit them from the ranks of certified mechanics out there. And these guys are certified GM, ASE certified mechanics who are also trained and carry weapons. So in their toolbox, they've got a gun. They put the suit on. They have to qualify with the weapons. They have to requalify with the weapons, all the time. And we rely on them very heavily. But they're They're one of the greatest assets we have that people have no idea. And they're in every motorcade. So if the car breaks down, they're assessing it immediately. And one time we were simply driving from the Air Force Base where we landed, taking the cars to the hotel, and I was driving the limo, and it just broke down and stopped. And I called the mechanic on the radio, and I said, "Hey, the car," and we got practically a motorcade with a police escort getting the cars from the airport to the hotel. And the mechanic came up and assessed, and he said, "Hey, it's the alternator." And this mechanic had that alternator swapped out in minutes. You know, if we hadn't told anyone, no one would have known. The second inauguration of President George W. Bush and the Capitol to the White House, we rode part of the time, we walked part of the time. We would practice and rehearse being shot at, being, you know, having rocks and all kinds of things thrown at you, and we would practice, what are we going to do? You're there really to prevent someone from getting too close to the car. On that day, people started throwing, we came to a certain group of people that were, you know, throwing snowballs, and some of them had rocks in them. Someone threw a fish. I don't know if it was a goldfish or a, you know, something they bought at the store or what, but you know, people do stupid things out there. And I remember driving the limo for President Bush, and, you know, people turn around and moon you or do weird things, hold up crazy signs, but, you know, not threatening, just kind of silly. Air Force One, for me, was a total joy because every time you got back to Air Force One, you knew you could relax for just a minute. You know, everyone could loosen their tie a little bit and relax. And if it was a long flight, you know, the agents could even catch a nap, could take that vest off and air out a little bit, you know, and let your hair down just a little bit. The food was outstanding as well. Funny thing was, I remember leaving the ranch kind of early on in my presidential career, and thinking, I wonder what we're going to eat on the plane, because we're riding from Texas back to D.C., and it's during a meal time, so we're about to be treated to a pretty cool meal. And it was hot dogs and potato chips. And I remember thinking, what the heck, man? Who ordered this? Well, it turned out that's what the president wanted, so that's what everyone got. A couple of weeks after the trip, you got a bill. And you had to pay for all the food that was consumed on the plane. And so they would add up all the food, everything that was consumed on a trip was weighed and measured, and they added that up, divided it by the number of people traveling on the plane, and you got a bill. So that was a little bit of a shocker for me coming in, just assuming that, you know, that the G's going to take care of you and you got all this good stuff. Stairs are always a problem and an issue, and I'll tell you why. You know, you see a president stumble, you see them, you know, unsure. Well, part of it is that. It's a different set of stairs getting up there almost every time, unless they're at Andrews. All of the ones that let the president in that upper door, the door with the presidential seal on it, the door that creates that iconic opportunity to turn around and wave to the country. The problem is those stairs are built into a truck. And so you have to drive a stair truck up to Air Force One, and they tend to be slippery when wet or cold. Air Force One has built-in stairs, a set of rear built-in stairs that, you know, you wouldn't want the president to walk up, and then it has a front set of stairs that can fold down. That camera shot is blocked by the motorcade, by people that are kind of clogging up that view. So Air Force One is a great way to go, but it's not the best way to go, because the press plane is absolutely the best way to travel. They have so much freedom on that plane and so much food, and it's just a lighter environment. And it's a beautiful thing because we will buy seats on that plane, and the plane is only partially filled, and the press knows how to have fun. I mean, they have a great time. There's a lot of laughter, and, you know, agents who know will choose to go over on the press plane. I was still in my mom's hospital room thinking this is going to change the rest of my life, because I am branded as a former Secret Service agent, as a retired agent. And, you know, when people ask you, what do you do? And I say, oh, well, I'm a retired Secret Service agent. Now it's going to be about Butler. They don't care about the books. They don't care about the speeches. They don't care about the leadership training. They want to know what happened at Butler. And I knew standing there in my mom's hospital room that this was going to change the conversation, not this week, not for the next month or year, but for the rest of my life. It's going to be about what happened at Butler. President Trump was the sitting president for 4 years. He was defeated in an election, and now he's coming back running again. And you don't typically see that. You know, when we look at protecting people, there's a lot of anger pointed toward our politicians. In conjunction with the temperature of our country, should have signaled to leadership that this is a big deal. Butler's ultimate failure, in my opinion, is going to go back to leadership. Certainly we saw the Secret Service director come and testify and not give satisfactory answers to some pretty simple questions. And it goes above that to the Department of Homeland Security, and I don't think we've seen anyone from the Department of Homeland Security be pressed on their leadership of the Secret Service. And you know, ever since Secret Service moved from Treasury to DHS in the wake of 9/11, I think the culture of the Secret Service has been impacted by that move. And autonomy for the Secret Service means that we have the ability to innovate and the ability to lead. When you get to dictate where your protectee goes, especially given a little bit of time, you can do a whole lot to render that place safe. And so whether it's the president going golfing or going for a run, with a little bit of heads up, we can deploy assets and, you know, literally clear an area for them to operate in that's safe and secure. You know, a lot of people have asked me recently about the future of the Secret Service, and, you know, do you see a bright future for the Secret Service? And my answer is going to be yes. Every time something happens that makes them reassess, they will come back stronger. There's no excuse for error, for failure, but their success is going to be tied to their ability to get out of DHS and get back to Treasury Department. And then, you know, let's get us back to the time when, you know, 1 in 10,000 applicants was accepted for the job. And so I started as a special agent in 1996 and retired in 2020. Secret Service has mandatory retirement at 57, and I think it used to be 55. It got bumped to 57, but at 57, you're put to pasture and you can go do something else. You know, I think there's a lot of agents that their identity is so wrapped up in that whole Secret Service thing, or maybe that whole law enforcement thing, the badge, you know, is their whole identity. And boy, I was really ready. After 24 years, I let go of that pretty easily. I think I was ready. There is a jading that happens too, and you know, you go into a restaurant, and you know, after doing it one way for 24 years, that's a little hard to give up. And so my wife will point out if I'm being hypervigilant about, you know, our surroundings, about the exit doors, about you know, who's coming in, and you know, looking them over and assessing what's going on. And that's my cue that okay, I need to calm down, or I need to relax a little bit. You know, I've tried to get better about that, but I think it's part of your DNA at this point. I think you've been changed, and so I just go into scenarios and situations, and given the opportunity, I do think about, well, if this breaks bad, you know, I'll sit in church and think, if somebody comes in here shooting the place up, you know, what are we going to do? I'm not sure I'll ever recover from that. I'm not sure I need to, but it does change you. And it makes you a pretty formidable asset to a company, or to, you know, whoever's going to hire you in the afterlife. But these days, my life is consumed with reliving the past through leadership training and teaching and coaching and mentoring. And so on the side, I'm writing books and going out and giving speeches, but leadership is my focus now. The first book that I wrote was called Cheating Death, which was really a combination of letters to my kids combined with advice and then stories from the Secret Service. And the second book is really an offshoot of the first book. It's called Staying Sharp. It'll be out in February.
I'm a producer on Authorized Account. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe and comment below with more topics you'd like to see us cover.